Just, oh God, where's everybody? God, I had a friend.
Talk to me, damn it! I want to know what's going on.
Released in 1982, First Blood introduced audiences to an action hero who would become an icon for decades, John Rambo. The story opens with a lost Vietnam veteran carrying the invisible wounds of war. Returning home, he finds no welcome, only loneliness, alienation, and an endless haunting. Arriving in a small town, Rambo clashes with Sheriff Will Teasel, an authoritarian and prejudiced man. Simply because of his rugged appearance, Rambo is driven out of town like a useless tramp. But when the tension boils over, an unequal battle erupts. The entire local police force and National Guard hunt down a lone man, a man who was trained to be the perfect killing machine. The only person who can prevent the tragedy is Colonel Sam Troutman, Rambo's mentor and spiritual father. First Blood doesn't just showcase tense action sequences, it also exposes the mental anguish of a veteran abandoned by society. This blend of violence and tragedy made the film a shock at the time of its release. And did you know, Rambo was originally supposed to die in this very film? That's just one of countless astonishing secrets behind the smoke and fire. Join me as we uncover the strangest and most shocking truths about First Blood, the movie that turned Rambo into an immortal legend. 1. The ending was so dark it had to be buried. Forever, can you imagine that Rambo, the hero who left the whole world breathless, was originally supposed to die in the first film? The theatrical version we know ends with Rambo collapsing into the arms of Colonel Troutman, sobbing, exposing all the pain of a veteran. It's a bitter ending, but it leaves a glimmer of hope, paving the way for the next installment. However, in the original filmed version, there was no hope at all. After unleashing his fury, Rambo collapses, utterly exhausted and desperate. He trembles, clutching his gun, forcing his own spiritual father, Colonel Troutman, to pull the trigger. A gunshot echoes in the night. Rambo falls, blood gushing out, his eyes vacant and then lifeless. The screen goes black. No future, no part 2, no indomitable icon. Just a pathetic tragedy about a soldier buried by life itself. That scene was fully edited, ready for public release, but when it was shown to a test audience, the entire theatre was stunned and erupted in anger. They couldn't accept Rambo dying like a wounded animal. The fierce backlash forced the film crew to do a U-turn in desperation, writing a more humane ending, leaving Rambo alive, wounded but not defeated. And that decision changed the entire history of cinema. But the film's fate wasn't settled yet, because another nightmare was waiting in the editing room. 2. The 3-hour cut that made Stallone want to bury the film. Few would have guessed that before becoming an action masterpiece, First Blood was almost an unredeemable disaster. The first cut ran for more than 3 hours, so tedious and messy that no one could even recognize the story of a heroic veteran. The pacing was inconsistent, the dialogue was long-winded, and many scenes were repeated, leaving the internal audience feeling exhausted. Sylvester Stallone, who had staked his career on the role of Rambo, bitterly said he wanted to buy back all the rights just to prevent the movie from being released. In his eyes, First Blood was turning from his greatest hope into a dangerous joke for his career. But instead of giving up, Stallone chose to lock himself in the editing room. He patiently worked with the editor to fine-tune every frame, aggressively cutting dozens of minutes of redundant scenes, removing cumbersome dialogue, and re-establishing the entire rhythm. The result was a film that was less than 100 minutes long, tight, tense, and full of energy. That risky decision saved the film, turning First Blood from a murky corpse in the editing room into an immortal action monument. However, Just when the behind-the-scenes story seemed to be calm, a real-life incident hit the film crew. 3. A real weapons heist on the set. Right in the middle of filming in the town of Hope, British Columbia, a real-life incident occurred that shocked everyone. A truck full of prop weapons, from machine guns and rifles to handguns, was broken into and completely emptied by thieves. The total value of the stolen goods was estimated at $50,000, a massive sum for the film crew at the time. The most frightening part? The weapons were supposed to be guarded by real soldiers, yet the thieves succeeded, turning the entire movie set into a real-life crime scene. In an instant, the fictional action set became a real security hotspot. Local newspapers ran sensational headlines. The police launched an investigation, and the film crew panicked over the risk of the entire project being shut down. To salvage the situation, the Canadian military was deployed to guard the remaining weapons, turning the movie set into a real military barracks. Stallone later admitted that the prop storage might have been more heavily guarded than a small military base. Fortunately, most of the stolen weapons were eventually recovered, but the incident added another layer of drama to the film's production history. And from another perspective, within the cast itself, a spectacular change also altered the face of First Blood. The role of Trautman changed hands at the last minute. Can you imagine how Rambo's image on screen would have changed if Colonel Sam Trautman had not been Richard Crenna, but a completely different face? In fact, the name originally chosen was Hollywood legend Kirk Douglas. With a long career from Spartacus to Paths of Glory, Douglas had the gravitas to be Rambo's spiritual father. But problems arose when he wanted to control all the dialogue and, especially, the ending. Trautman had to be the one to shoot and kill Rambo, maintaining the tragic spirit of the novel. Stallone and the crew vehemently objected. They believed that for Rambo to become an icon, the character could not die in the very first film. The tension escalated to the point that Douglas withdrew just a few days before the cameras started rolling. In the chaos, Richard Crenna was called in as a firefighter solution, with almost no time to prepare. But something strange happened. With his calm, dignified, yet compassionate demeanor, Crenna embodied Colonel Trautman in a way that audiences could never forget. A last-minute cast change, but it became the perfect choice, leading the entire film in a different direction. And while a key role was shaped by that surprising turn of events, in another scene, Stallone was willing to sacrifice his own body to bring raw authenticity to the screen. 5. The cliff jump that actually broke Stallone's bones. In the deep forests of British Columbia, the film crew prepared for one of the most dangerous scenes. Rambo being chased, desperately leaping from a sheer cliff. Many were sure a stuntman would do it for Stallone, but the actor flatly refused. He declared, "If Rambo has to be in pain, then I have to go through that pain too." The camera rolled. Stallone's body plunged headfirst, colliding with branches repeatedly before hitting the ground hard. The impact was so strong that it fractured several of his ribs, leaving him in so much pain he could barely breathe. Yet he gritted his teeth, endured the pain, and continued filming, making the scene one of the most authentic moments in the movie. On screen, Rambo's ragged breathing and pained face are Stallone's real agony, without a single bit of pretense. If that jump cost Stallone his own body, in another scene, another accident left a permanent mark on the film. 6. The punch that broke a stuntman's nose on screen. In the scene where Rambo explodes at the police station, the camera captures every chaotic, violent move. But one punch went beyond the boundaries of acting. Stallone, in the fury of his character, threw a blow so hard it broke the nose of the stuntman opposite him. The scream of pain was immediate, not a fake cry for the film, but the instinctive reaction of a real person being struck down. Instead of cutting it, the film crew decided to keep the moment. It was so real, so intense, that it made the entire sequence burst with energy. After the scene was done, Stallone was horrified and apologized, while the stuntman, holding his bloody nose, just laughed. That moment became part of the legend, contributing to the film's status as an unparalleled masterpiece. And while Rambo could break his opponents with his fists in the film, in the original novel, his victim count was far more terrifying. 7. The original Rambo was much colder and more ruthless. The image of Rambo in the film is that of a wounded veteran, a survivor abandoned by society but still humane. However, in David Morrell's novel First Blood, the character is completely different. The Rambo of the book is a cold, emotionless killing machine, mercilessly murdering police officers, soldiers, and even innocent civilians. The number of victims he leaves behind totals 15, even 20 people. Rambo himself doesn't even bother to count anymore. It is no longer the tragic hero seen on screen, but the portrait of a cold-blooded psychopath, turned into a monster by war. If the book had been adapted verbatim, Rambo would never have been loved by audiences, nor could he have become a symbol of empathy for real-life veterans. But to turn a ruthless character into a humane icon, Hollywood went through a decade of torment, loss, and sweat. 8. 10 years of development hell. Before the film was made. As soon as the novel First Blood was released in 1972, many film studios rushed to snatch up the rights. But instead of being made quickly, the project was stalled for over 10 years. More than 18 different scripts were written and then discarded. One version turned Rambo into a psychopathic killer, even more cold-blooded than in the book. Another version leaned towards political satire, turning the story into a mockery of American society. Many directors and big stars came and went, all leaving behind a project considered too risky, too vague. First Blood floated from Warner Brothers to Columbia, then to Carolco Pictures, like a hot potato that no one dared to hold for long. Only when Stallone stepped in did the project find a way out. He took the script, cut the gore, infused it with humanity, and reframed Rambo's image as a victim of his time. From a seemingly impossible mess, a new cinematic legend was born. But the story of casting the main role was no less dramatic. 9. When A-listers almost became Rambo. Can you believe that before Stallone became synonymous with Rambo, Hollywood had a list of the biggest names in the business? Clint Eastwood, the cold Western hero Robert De Niro, the master of method acting Al Pacino, the fiery icon Dustin Hoffman, the versatile star, and even Steve McQueen, the action legend. All were targeted for the role of John Rambo, but one by one they all turned it down. Eastwood thought the character didn't fit his style. De Niro and Hoffman were overwhelmed by the violent script. McQueen was considered too old. Pacino wanted Rambo to be a frantic, uncontrollable madman, something the producers couldn't accept. If one of them had accepted, Rambo would certainly have been a completely different character. Maybe as cold as Eastwood, as explosive as Pacino, or as introspective as Hoffman. But in the end, fate chose Stallone, who poured his heart and soul into the role, rewrote the script, and created an irreplaceable image. And thanks to this role, in just one night, Stallone became an international superstar. 10. The first Hollywood film to hit Chinese screens. In 1982, when First Blood was selected to be shown in China, it was a historical turning point. At that time, the country with 1 billion people had almost never opened its doors to major Hollywood films. But then the image of a lone veteran, resiliently fighting against injustice, resonated with millions of viewers. Rambo was no longer just a movie character. He became a symbol of strength, perseverance, and the will to survive. The reaction in China was explosive. The cinemas were packed with audiences. People whispered about the name Stallone, seeing him as a hero from the distant West. Overnight, Stallone went from an American star to a global phenomenon, and First Blood became a bridge that helped Hollywood cinema expand its influence in Asia. But in exchange for that fame, the film crew had to endure a real-life nightmare, a storm that blanketed the sky in white. 11. the blizzard that turned the set into a nightmare. The film crew chose the town of Hope, British Columbia, as the setting because its wild and desolate beauty was perfect for First Blood's suffocating atmosphere. But nature was not on their side. An unexpected blizzard swept through, blanketing the entire area. Cars were immobilized, equipment froze, and crew members were trapped in hotels for days. The filming schedule was turned upside down, and many scenes had to be changed or rescheduled, creating immense pressure on the crew. Yet, adversity brought an unexpected gift. The biting cold, the thick ice, and the vast loneliness of the mountains became a vivid texture for the film itself. On screen, Rambo appeared amidst a cold, suffocatingly lonely landscape, all thanks to that terrifying blizzard. And in that bone-chilling cold, Stallone still chose to keep his character at a very human point. A man who never intentionally killed anyone. 12. The action movie, where Rambo never intentionally killed anyone. When you think of Rambo, do you immediately imagine a cold-blooded warrior, armed to the teeth and ready to take down anyone in his way? But the truth in First Blood is completely different. Throughout the entire film, John Rambo never deliberately killed anyone. The only person who died, Deputy Gault, was not from a direct attack by Rambo, but because he lost his balance and fell from the helicopter during the pursuit. All of Rambo's other actions were within the boundaries of self-defense. The terrifying forest traps, the precise blows, all aimed at neutralizing, not killing. That was the crucial change that Stallone resolutely defended. He wanted audiences to see Rambo as a broken soul, a human being ruined by war, not a cold-blooded monster. It was this humanization that made viewers sympathize, feel pity, and follow Rambo throughout his journey. But in the original novel, the tragedy was much more harsh, to the point that neither of the two main characters had a way out. 13. A bleak novel ending that audiences never saw. In David Morrell's novel First Blood, the story does not end with a sobbing Rambo, but with a chillingly cold conclusion. After days of bloodshed, Rambo is critically wounded, crawling in his final moments. He clutches his gun and an explosive package, intending to turn himself into a bomb for a violent death. But his exhausted body no longer has the strength to light the fuse. In that very last moment, Colonel Troutman, who once trained and understood Rambo, appears. There are no words of comfort, no miracles, just a single mercy shot that echoes, blowing Rambo's skull away. And everything ends. Both Rambo and Teasel are dead. Two symbols of two generations of American soldiers falling, leaving behind a tragic tableau of war and its consequences. A poignant, heavy ending that, if it had been kept on screen, Rambo would likely never have become a living legend. And because of that, during the film adaptation, there was fierce debate about whether Rambo was a hero or a villain. But the script almost turned Rambo into a pure villain. Behind the scenes of First Blood, there was a tense battle of wits over who the central character really was. Kirk Douglas, the original choice for Troutman, wanted the story to follow the novel's spirit. Rambo had to be the insane one, a distorted ghost of war, while Troutman was the true hero, the one who ended his old student's life to save the town. It would have been a dark version, where Rambo was nothing short of a villain. But Stallone and the crew firmly objected. They wanted Rambo to be a victim of society, a warrior carrying tragedy but still possessing humanity. If Douglas's idea had been kept, audiences would have looked at Rambo with fear, not sympathy. And that character certainly could not have become an icon for millions of real-life veterans. Ultimately, Douglas left the role, and Rambo stepped onto the screen with a more humane appearance than ever before. While the script debate had yet to subside, another behind-the-scenes detail surprised viewers. The soldiers' gear in the film was not fake, but real battlefield equipment. 15. The National Guard gear in the film was all real. When audiences see the clumsy National Guardsmen in First Blood, Few would guess that the military gear they wore was completely real. The film crew borrowed the heavy helmets, old jackets, and leftover equipment from Canadian military supply depots. The sloppiness of these surplus outfits made the unit look exactly like what they were. Part-time soldiers, both clumsy and naive as they hunted down a seasoned veteran. On screen, every scratch, every faded uniform added to the authenticity, turning the chase scene into a deadly game no different from real life. If the real equipment brought life to the film, then the person behind the camera, whom no one would have expected, was the one who breathed soul into this entire masterpiece. 16. From comedy director to father of Rambo. Before taking the helm of First Blood, the name Ted Kotcheff was associated with light comedies and dramas like Fun with Dick and Jane. No one could have imagined that he would be the one to create the dark, violent and desperate portrait of a veteran abandoned by society. Kotcheff entered the project when no one else dared to, and with his unique vision, he turned First Blood into not just an action movie, but a tragedy about trauma and isolation. That bold choice shocked audiences. A comedy director gave birth to Rambo, a symbol of war and survival. But sometimes, even the smallest details can change the entire tone of a story. 17. The Batcave was changed to a rat cave in First Blood. In the original novel, when cornered, Rambo hides in a Batcave, dark, smelly, and evoking a terrifying savagery. But when brought to the screen, the director was forced to make a change. The reason wasn't artistic, but practical. Rats are easier to control than bats and safer for the film crew. So the Bat Cave in the book became the Rat Cave in the film. A seemingly trivial detail, but it unintentionally created a completely different symbol. The scene of Rambo being bitten by rats, struggling in the dark, haunted audiences no less than the original, and highlighted the utter destitution he had to endure. And then, when the gunfire subsided, a sad melody unexpectedly played, leaving a lingering echo longer than the sound of shots. 18. The haunting ballad that closed a decade of gunfire. In the middle of a film full of bloodshed, the last thing that lingers is a haunting piece of music. It's a Long Road, composed by Jerry Goldsmith, with lyrics by Hal Shaper and sung by Dan Hill, plays as Rambo quietly walks into the darkness. The melancholic melody is like the lament of a broken soul, ending the journey with silence instead of bombs and bullets. This ballad never climbed the charts, but it was etched into the minds of viewers, becoming the heartbeat of the entire film series. Later, whenever that melody appeared in the sequels, people knew that the tragedy and pain within Rambo were about to resurface. And alongside the music, another detail also became a legend, following the character for decades. 19. The iconic custom-made knife for Rambo. The massive knife in Rambo's hand was not a cheap prop, but a masterpiece by Jimmy Lyle, a master knife maker from Arkansas. The long blade, the serrated spine, and the hollow handle containing a survival kit, matches, a compass, a fishhook, a needle and thread, all were designed for survival in the wilderness. It was not just a weapon, but a symbol of self-reliance, of a warrior ready to survive in any situation. After the film's release, the knife immediately became a phenomenon, with countless replicas flooding the market. To this day, the Rambo knife remains one of the most famous weapons in cinematic history. And like a sharp knife slicing through the box office, the film, with its modest budget, made a miracle. 20. The $15 million film that became a $160 million legend. With a budget of only about $15 million, First Blood was not initially expected to be a miracle. It was too dark, too heavy, and seemed unlikely to compete with the flashy blockbusters of the time. But then, everything was reversed. Upon its release, the film grossed over $160 million worldwide, far exceeding all predictions. This success turned Rambo from a character who was supposed to exist in just one film into a global icon. paving the way for a series of sequels, comics, toys, games, and even animated shows. From a small project, First Blood grew into a monument, creating one of the greatest action franchises in cinematic history. First Blood deserves to be considered the dark gem of the action genre, where violence blends with tragedy to create a haunting experience. The film doesn't just portray suffocating tension, but also highlights the mental pain of a person abandoned by society. Stallone's portrayal of Rambo was brilliant, both fierce and full of humanity, making the character a timeless icon. From the music and setting to the acting, everything came together to create a work that was both realistic and poignant. If you also enjoy fascinating behind-the-scenes facts like these, don't forget to hit like and share so more people can know. And remember to follow the channel to not miss the next shocking cinema stories.